to Sleepy Facts with Justin. Tonight, we're going to explore something truly gentle, the quiet relationship between time and memory. As you settle into your pillow, let yourself drift through the hours we'll spend together. There's no need to follow every word. Your mind can wander like clouds across an evening sky. We'll be here, speaking softly about how time moves through us and how we move through time. Tonight's journey takes us into the soft spaces where moments become memories, where yesterday blurs into last year, where childhood summers stretched like honey poured slow across August afternoons. We'll discover why time feels different now than it once did, how your brain holds onto moments even as they slip away, and the gentle science of remembering. So close your eyes if you haven't already. Let the weight of the day dissolve. There's nothing you need to do but rest. If you drift away before we finish, that's exactly as it should be. Time, after all, is just a river, and sleep is simply letting yourself float. Let's begin. Deep within your brain, nestled beneath layers of tissue soft as rose petals, lies a structure shaped like a seahorse. The ancient Greeks noticed this resemblance and named it the hippocampus, from the words for horse and sea monster. But there's nothing monstrous about this delicate curve of neurons. It is, in fact, one of the gentlest architects you'll ever know. The hippocampus builds your memories the way a careful gardener tends rows of vegetables. Each experience that comes to you, the scent of coffee this morning, the sound of rain against your window, the feeling of fabric against your skin. Each of these moments arrives first as electrical whispers between brain cells. These whispers travel across tiny gaps called synapses, spaces so small that millions could fit on the head of a pin. When you experience something new, your neurons begin to talk to one another. They release chemicals called neurotransmitters that drift across those microscopic spaces like messages in bottles crossing a quiet sea. If the same neurons talk often enough, they form stronger connections. They become friends in a way, and these friendships create circuits, pathways of electricity that hold the shape of your memories. The hippocampus organizes these memories in chronological order, arranging the moments of your life like photographs in an album, morning before afternoon, Tuesday before Wednesday, the time you learned to tie your shoes before the time you learned to drive. This sequencing happens without your conscious effort, the way your heart beats without being told. Scientists learned how essential the hippocampus is through a sad but illuminating story. In 1953, a man named Henry Molaison underwent surgery for severe epilepsy. The doctors removed his hippocampus. The epilepsy stopped, but so did his ability to form new long-term memories. Henry could remember his childhood with clarity. He could recall the years before his surgery. But after that day, each morning dawned fresh and unfamiliar. Yesterday dissolved like sugar in water. Henry's story taught us that without the hippocampus, new experiences cannot be woven into the tapestry of long-term memory. We need this seahorse-shaped structure to convert the fleeting present into the lasting past. Your memories don't stay in the hippocampus forever, though. Think of it as a staging area, a temporary home where new memories rest before finding their permanent place. Over time, through processes that happen largely while you sleep, these memories migrate to other parts of your brain, settling into the folds of your cortex like snow, accumulating on distant mountains. This migration is essential. Your hippocampus has limited space. It cannot hold every breakfast you've eaten, every conversation you've had, every time you've opened a door. Instead, it holds the recent ones, the important ones, the ones still being processed, the others disperse, becoming part of the vast network of your long-term storage. And here's something beautiful. Your brain stores roughly 4 units of information in your short-term memory at any given moment. 4 things, not 40, not 400. 4, like 4 smooth stones you could hold in your palm. This limitation might seem frustrating, but it's actually merciful. Imagine if every single detail demanded your immediate attention. You would drown in sensation. Instead, your mind curates. It selects. It chooses which 4 stones to hold while letting the rest settle gently to the bottom of the stream. You might remember the 4 main points someone made in conversation, while the exact phrasing drifts away. You might recall 4 items you need from the store, while forgetting the specific order in which you thought of them. Scientists have found that you can expand this capacity slightly through a technique called chunking. Instead of remembering 4 individual digits, you remember 4 groups of digits. Instead of 4 words, 4 phrases, your mind bundles information together, like tying flowers into bouquets. Each bouquet counts as 1 item, even though it contains several blooms. Right now, as you lie in darkness, your hippocampus is already beginning the night's work. The memories you made today, reading these words, the feeling of your sheets, the last thing you saw before closing your eyes. They're being processed, sorted, tagged for importance. Some will migrate to long-term storage. Others will fade like footprints in soft sand. There's no effort required from you. This happens in the deep waters beneath consciousness. Your only task is to rest, to let the seahorse-shaped structure do what it has done every night of your life since before you were born, when you were still floating in darkness, already beginning to remember. Time, as you experience it, is not quite what the clock says it is. A second on your watch is always a second, but a second in your mind can stretch or compress like a living thing. There's a phenomenon scientists call the oddball effect. When something unexpected happens, your brain suddenly pays fierce attention. It devotes extra resources to recording the event. More neurons fire, more details get encoded, and later, when you remember that moment, it feels like it lasted longer than it actually did. Picture a car swerving toward you, then correcting at the last moment. The whole event might take 3 or 4 seconds, but in your memory, it unfolds with the slow grace of a ballet. You remember the angle of the sunlight, the expression on the other driver's face, the sound of your own breath catching. Your brain recorded all of this extra detail, and detail creates the sensation of duration. As a child, almost everything triggered the oddball effect. Every experience was novel. The first time you tasted ice cream, rode a bicycle, saw fireflies in summer darkness, heard the ocean. Each of these moments was unexpected, uncharted territory. Your brain devoted enormous energy to recording them. That's why childhood memories often feel vast and slow. You were encoding everything in high definition. But as you age, fewer things surprise you. You've tasted ice cream 1,000 times. You've seen countless summer evenings. The brain, efficient creature that it is, stops recording redundant information. Why store the details of your 700th drive to work when it's identical to the 699 that came before? The brain simply notes this again and moves on. This efficiency comes at a cost. When experiences aren't fully recorded, they don't occupy much space in memory. And when you look back, it feels like they barely happened at all. This is why a month of routine can vanish from recollection, while a single afternoon of novelty remains vivid for decades. There's another theory about why time accelerates as we age. It's called the proportional theory. When you are 5 years old, 1 year represents 20% of your entire existence. It's a massive chunk of your life. When you are 50, 1 year is only 2%. The proportional weight shrinks. Imagine you have a small cup and a large barrel, both initially empty. You pour 1 gallon of water into each. In the small cup, that gallon makes an enormous difference. It might fill the cup entirely. In the barrel, it barely makes a ripple. Same amount of water, different proportional impact. This is why childhood summers seemed infinite. A summer vacation might be 8 weeks. At age 8, 8 weeks is a substantial fraction of your remembered life. At age 40, 8 weeks is almost nothing. A brief interlude between spreadsheets and obligations. But here's the gentle truth. You can reclaim some of that stretched, spacious time. Not all of it, perhaps, but enough to feel the difference. The secret is novelty. When you introduce new experiences, your brain begins encoding again. It pays attention, it records. This doesn't require grand adventures. You don't need to move to a foreign country or take up skydiving. Small novelties work too. Take a different route home. Eat lunch in a park you've never visited. Listen to music from a genre you've ignored. Read poetry in the middle of the afternoon. Let yourself be surprised by the taste of fruit eaten slowly, as if for the first time. When you do this, days begin to accumulate texture again. They stop blurring together. You create what researchers call temporal landmarks, moments that stand out from the flow, giving structure to memory. These landmarks act like flagpoles in a vast field. They help you measure the distance you've traveled. Temporal landmarks can be personal or shared. A birthday, the first day of a season, the anniversary of an important event, the beginning of a new year. These moments feel significant, and that significance makes them memorable. They divide time into chapters. Even the smallest landmark can have this effect. Deciding that every Tuesday you'll drink tea instead of coffee. Declaring Friday evenings to be for reading rather than screens. Creating these tiny rituals gives your brain reference points. Tuesday becomes different from Wednesday. Friday evening carries its own flavor. And slowly, mercifully, time begins to feel more spacious again, not because it has actually slowed. Time flows at its constant pace, regardless of our perception. But because you're living inside it again, the way you did as a child, you're there for it, present, noticing right now, this moment. You have a choice. You can let this night be identical to every other night, or you can notice something small, the particular texture of your pillow, the specific quality of silence in your room, the way your breath sounds when you pay attention to it. These tiny acts of noticing plant flagpoles in the field of memory. Tomorrow morning, you might not remember falling asleep, but you might remember this, the feeling of choosing to pay attention, even as you let go into rest. And that small memory will be a landmark, a moment that was yours, a second that didn't compress into nothing, but expanded just slightly into something you can keep inside your brain there are cells that do something extraordinary. They measure time not with gears and springs like a pocket watch, but with patterns of electrical firing as precise as any clockwork. Scientists call them time cells. These neurons don't respond to sights or sounds or touches. Instead, they respond to when something happened. They have what researchers describe as receptive fields in time, similar to how cells in your visual system have receptive fields in space. Let me explain what this means, gently and slowly, so the concept can settle like dust motes, finding their rest in your visual cortex. Certain neurons respond only when something appears in a specific location. One neuron might fire when you see something in the upper left corner of your vision. Another fires for the lower right. Each neuron is tuned to its own patch of space. Together, these neurons create a map of what you're seeing. Time cells work the same way, but instead of mapping space, they map the past. One time cell might fire when something happened 2 seconds ago. Another fires for events 5 seconds in the past. Another for 10 seconds ago. Together, they create a timeline, a representation of recent history encoded in neural activity. This representation is compressed, just as visual space is compressed. In your visual system, the center of your gaze, the fovea, gets the most neural real estate. Things at the periphery are represented with less detail. Similarly, in your temporal representation, recent events get more neural attention than distant ones. Events from 5 seconds ago are encoded with high precision. Events from 5 minutes ago, less so. Events from 5 days ago exist in even fuzzier detail. This compression is why you remember recent things more accurately than older things. It's not a failure of memory. It's a feature of how memory is designed. Think of it like looking down a long hallway. Objects nearby appear large and detailed. Objects far away become small and indistinct. Both near and far things are in the same hallway, the same reality. But your perception of them differs based on distance. Time works this way too. recent events are close and clear. Distant events recede into blur. This compression actually helps you function. If every moment of your past were equally vivid and demanding of attention, you'd be overwhelmed. You need recent events to be accessible and detailed because they're usually most relevant to what you're doing right now. The conversation you had 5 minutes ago matters more to your current situation than a conversation from 5 years ago. But distant memories aren't lost. They're just compressed, stored efficiently with less detail but still present. Sometimes a smell or a song will bring one forward, and suddenly something from decades ago becomes vivid again. The memory was always there, folded small, waiting. Researchers studying time cells have found something beautiful. Just as you can shift your gaze in visual space, moving your eyes to look at something in your peripheral vision, you can also shift your attention in time. You can mentally scan backward, bringing distant memories into focus. When you try to remember what you ate for dinner 3 days ago, your brain is essentially moving its gaze through time. It's scanning backward, looking for the moment when you sat down to eat. This scanning takes effort, just as searching a dark room with a flashlight takes effort. You have to sweep your attention across the darkness until you find what you're looking for. The further back you scan, the harder it becomes, not because the memories are gone, but because they're compressed. They occupy less neural space. Your time cells representing 3 days ago have wider receptive fields, less precision. It's like trying to read a book where the text gets progressively smaller with each page. This is the recency effect. It appears in nearly every memory experiment ever conducted. People remember recent items better than middle items, and middle items better than oldest items. This pattern holds across seconds, minutes, hours, days, years. It's one of the most fundamental properties of memory, but here's where it gets interesting. The brain doesn't have just one timeline. You have multiple temporal representations operating at different scales. Some time cells track seconds, others track minutes, still others track hours or days. These different scales nest inside each other like Russian dolls. When you remember this morning, you're accessing one temporal scale. When you remember last week, you're accessing another. When you remember your childhood, you're working with an even broader, more compressed timeline. All of these coexist, running parallel like railway tracks carrying different trains. Right now, as you rest, your time cells are firing in their patient patterns. Some are marking the seconds since you last moved. Others are tracking the minutes since you turned off the light. Still others hold space for the hours that make up this night, this day, this week of your life. You don't have to do anything with this information. Just know that even as you drift, even as consciousness fades, your brain continues its faithful timekeeping. It marks the passage of moments. It compresses the recent past into memory. It maintains the timeline that allows you to wake tomorrow with a sense of continuity. You will know it is tomorrow. You will know that tonight happened. This knowledge seems simple, almost trivial, but it requires the constant, precise firing of thousands of time cells, measuring out the seconds and minutes like drops of water, filling a vast and patient ocean. Rest now. Let the time cells do their work. They've been counting since before you were born, and they'll count until your very last moment. Faithful as tides, steady as breath, marking time so you don't have to. Every night while you sleep, your brain becomes a garden. Not a garden of flowers or vegetables, but of memories. And like any garden, it requires tending, weeding, watering, the gentle work of deciding what to keep and what to let go. This happens largely without your awareness in the deep stages of sleep where consciousness dissolves. The neurons that fired while you were awake begin firing again, rehearsing the day's patterns. It's as if they're playing recordings of what happened, replaying experiences to strengthen them, to decide which deserve the gift of permanence. Scientists call this process consolidation. During the day, memories are fragile things, easily disrupted. They're written in pencil, not ink, but sleep transforms them. It traces over the pencil marks with something more lasting. By morning, some of what you experienced has been woven more securely into the fabric of long-term memory. This doesn't happen instantly. The consolidation process continues for hours throughout the night in experiments with rats learning a new maze. Researchers found that neurons kept reactivating in patterns related to the maze long after the learning session ended. The rats were literally dreaming the maze into permanence, running its corridors in neural space while their bodies rested. Human sleep works similarly. When you learn something new during the day, your brain continues processing it at night. This is why sleep is so essential for students, for anyone acquiring new skills. The learning doesn't end when you close the book or put down the instrument. It continues in darkness, refined and strengthened by the mysterious work of sleeping neurons. But consolidation isn't just about making memories stronger. It's also about integration. Your brain doesn't want isolated facts. It wants a coherent story, a web of connections. So during sleep, new memories are linked to old ones. Today's experience is woven into the context of yesterday's, last week's, last year's. Researchers describe this as representational drift. The pattern of neural activity associated with a new memory gradually shifts to resemble related older memories. It's as if the brain is asking, where does this new experience belong in the larger landscape of what I know? And then gently moving it into place. This integration is essential for understanding. Facts without context are nearly useless. You need to know how things relate to each other. When you learn that robins migrate, that fact becomes meaningful only when connected to what you already know about birds, seasons, migration patterns, the tilt of the earth. Sleep helps build those connections. There's something else happening too. Your circadian system, the biological clock that times your sleep and wakefulness, plays an active role in memory consolidation. It's not just that consolidation happens to occur during sleep. The circadian system actually modulates the process, making memory formation more efficient at certain times than others. Studies have shown that learning and memory performance vary depending on circadian phase. Your brain is more receptive to new information at some hours than others. And crucially, the circadian system may help protect memories during consolidation by dampening neuroplasticity during sleep. This might seem counterintuitive. Isn't neuroplasticity the brain's ability to change and form new connections a good thing? Yes, but it needs to be controlled. If your brain were equally plastic during consolidation, new memories might interfere with the ones being transferred to long-term storage. The circadian system helps prevent this by creating a more stable environment during the sleep phase. Think of it like developing photographs in a dark room. You need controlled conditions. Too much light and the image is ruined. The circadian system provides those controlled conditions, dimming the brain's plasticity just enough to let memories develop properly. This coordinated dance between sleep and circadian rhythms is beautifully intricate. They're not separate systems that merely coincide. They interact functionally, each supporting the other's contribution to memory. Sleep provides the time and neural state for consolidation. The circadian system provides the timing and stability. When either system is disrupted, memory suffers. Chronic sleep deprivation impairs consolidation. Circadian misalignment, like what happens with jet lag or shift work, disrupts the delicate timing. Both systems need to function properly for memory to thrive. This is why your grandmother was right when she told you to sleep on a problem. It's why students who pull all-nighters before exams often perform worse than those who study moderately and sleep well. It's why a good night's rest often brings clarity to confusion. The brain literally reorganizes itself during sleep, sorting and integrating the day's experiences. Right now, you're participating in this ancient process. The thoughts you had today, the sights you saw, the conversations you held, all of it is being sorted as you drift deeper into sleep. Some will be strengthened and kept. Others will be released, allowed to fade like morning mist. You cannot which memories your brain chooses to consolidate. That decision happens beneath consciousness, guided by criteria you don't access. Emotional importance, novelty, repetition, relevance to existing knowledge. Your sleeping brain is wiser than your waking mind in some ways. It knows what you need to remember. So let go. Release the day. Trust that what needs to be kept will be kept. Your brain has been doing this work every night of your life. It's extraordinarily good at it. The garden tends itself. You need only sleep, and in sleeping, allow the consolidation to unfold. By morning, you'll wake with memories more solid than when you closed your eyes. You might not notice the difference consciously, but the work will have been done. The recordings replayed, the connections strengthened, the garden tended while you wandered in dreams. You exist always in what we call the present moment. But what exactly is the present? How long does now last? If you try to pin down the present, it becomes slippery. As soon as you notice this moment, it has already become the past. By the time you think the word now, that now has vanished. The present seems to be infinitely thin, a knife edge between past and future with no duration at all. Yet that can't be quite right either, because you do experience a sense of nowness that has some width to it. When you listen to music, you hear not just a single note, but a phrase unfolding. When someone speaks, you comprehend not just isolated sounds, but words and sentences. You experience the present as having texture, duration, a kind of thickness. Psychologists suggest that the psychological present, the span of time that feels like now, lasts somewhere between 2 and 3 seconds. This is the window of immediate experience, the duration within which events feel simultaneous or continuously present. Imagine watching waves on a beach. Each wave takes a few seconds to roll in, crest, and dissolve into foam. You experience the whole wave as a single event, a unified now, even though the beginning of the wave came before its end. The entire motion feels present to you. That's the psychological present, stretching to accommodate the natural rhythm of change. This flexible now serves you well. If your present were truly infinitesimal, you couldn't comprehend anything that unfolds over time. Music would be incomprehensible, just isolated notes with no melody. Speech would be meaningless, just discrete sounds with no words. Action would be impossible. You couldn't tie your shoes or pour water, because these require experiencing a sequence as a unified whole. So your brain creates this elastic present, this brief window where time feels thick and graspable. Events within this window feel immediate and real in a way that events outside it do not. Things that happened 4 seconds ago are already memory, already past. Things that will happen 4 seconds from now are future, abstract, not yet real. But here's something curious. The width of your psychological present can change depending on your state of mind. When you're anxious or afraid, the present can compress. You become locked in each instant, unable to see beyond immediate threat. Time feels fragmented, choppy. When you're relaxed and absorbed, the present can expand. Musicians in flow state report that time seems to slow down. Athletes describe similar experiences. The present becomes spacious, accommodating. You inhabit each moment more fully because you're not fractured by worry about past or future. This is part of why meditation and mindfulness practices affect time perception. They train attention to rest in the present without fragmenting into past regret or future anxiety. And when attention settles, the present feels wider, more inhabitable, not because time itself has changed, but because your relationship to it has. Right now, as you lie in darkness, your present is perhaps as wide as it ever gets. There's nothing demanding your immediate attention. No threat, no urgent task. You can let the present expand like a slow breath, like a cat stretching in sunlight. Notice how this moment has room in it. Room for the feeling of your body against the mattress. Room for the sound of your breathing. Room for these words arriving in your awareness. Room for the thoughts that drift through like clouds. All of this fits comfortably in the elastic present. This spaciousness is part of what makes rest restful. When you're rushing through the day, your present is crowded. Each moment is stuffed with tasks and worries, with things you should have done and things you need to do. There's no room to simply be, but now, in this gentle darkness, the present has space again. You can inhabit it fully without needing to already be thinking about the next moment. This is rare and precious. For most of the day, you live slightly ahead of yourself, preparing for what comes next. Only in rest do you truly settle into now. And memory requires this settling. To encode an experience, you have to be present for it. If you're always half elsewhere, always planning the next thing, experiences don't fully imprint. They slide by like scenery glimpsed from a speeding train, visible but not absorbed. This is another reason childhood memories feel so vivid. Children inhabit the present more fully than adults. They're not mentally rehearsing tomorrow's meeting or replaying yesterday's conversation. They're here now, entirely absorbed in the texture of this moment. And that absorption creates rich, detailed memories. You can reclaim some of that absorption even as an adult, not by becoming childish, but by remembering how to be present, by letting the now expand to its natural width, by giving your attention to what is actually happening, rather than to the endless commentary about what might happen or what should have happened. This doesn't require effort exactly. It's more like releasing effort, like letting a held breath go. Right now, you're already doing it. Simply by resting, you've stepped out of the rushing current of doing and planning. You've allowed yourself to settle into the present moment's natural spaciousness. Feel how much room there is in this now. Enough room for your whole body. Enough room for the darkness around you. Enough room for these words and for the silence between them. Enough room to simply be without needing to be anything in particular. This is the texture of now when you're not fighting it. Soft, accommodating, wide enough to hold whatever arises without strain. And in this width, memory forms differently, not as a blur of undifferentiated moments, but as something textured and real. Tomorrow, You might not remember the exact words you're hearing now, but you might remember this feeling, the spaciousness of a present moment allowed to expand, the texture of now when you're fully here to experience it, and that memory, that sense of having rested in real time rather than anxious time, will be its own kind of gift. We tend to think of forgetting as a failure, a flaw in the system. We wish we could remember everything, every face, every name, every conversation, every moment of our lives preserved in perfect detail. But forgetting is not a bug, it's a feature, an essential one. Imagine if you actually did remember everything. Every time you've tied your shoes, every meal you've eaten, every time you've opened a door or turned on a light, every face you've glimpsed on a street, every word you've read, every advertisement you've passed, every breath you've taken, the totality would be crushing. You would drown in detail. Your mind would be so cluttered with the trivial that you couldn't find the significant. You'd be paralyzed by information, unable to act because every action would trigger an avalanche of memories of every other time you'd done something similar. There was a man, documented in psychological literature, who came close to this, Solomon Cherysheevsky, studied by Russian neuropsychologist Alexander Luria, had a memory so powerful it seemed unlimited. He could memorize hundreds of digits, recall lists perfectly decades after hearing them once, remember the exact position of every person in a room he'd entered years before. But this gift was also a curse. Cherysheevsky struggled to function in daily life. He couldn't read effectively because each word triggered cascades of associations and memories that derailed comprehension. He couldn't hold normal conversations. He couldn't forget anything. And this inability to forget made normal life nearly impossible. His story teaches us that forgetting is protective. It's how the brain maintains sanity in a world of overwhelming input. You need to forget most things so you can attend to the few things that matter. Your brain accomplishes this through elegant decay. Memories that aren't reinforced gradually fade. the neural connections weaken, details blur. Eventually, the memory becomes inaccessible, not because it's been deleted exactly, but because the path to it has grown over, like a trail in a forest no one walks anymore. This decay happens faster for some types of information than others. Abstract facts fade quickly unless reinforced. Sensory details blur. The exact words someone spoke become a general sense of what they meant. The specific date of an event is lost while the season remains. Emotional memories last longer. Evolution has shaped the brain to prioritize emotionally significant experiences because these are often the ones you need to remember for survival and encounter with danger. A moment of profound joy, a betrayal, a kindness. These leave deeper marks than neutral events. But even emotional memories fade eventually. The sharpness dulls. What once could make you weep becomes a story you can tell calmly. Time is merciful this way. It doesn't erase the past, but it softens its edges. Grief becomes gentler. Embarrassment loses its sting. Even traumatic memories, while they may never fully disappear, can become less intrusive with time and healing. This softening is a form of forgiveness. The past releases its grip. You're allowed to move forward without carrying every hurt in full intensity. The brain's gradual forgetting is an act of kindness to yourself. There's also deliberate forgetting, though you're usually not aware of it happening. Your brain actively suppresses certain memories, not dramatically, not through repression necessarily, but through a process of deprioritization. Memories that are no longer relevant get tagged as unimportant. They're still there technically, but they don't surface easily. This is why you can forget where you parked your car from 3 days ago, even though you found it just fine at the time. That memory served its purpose. You don't need it anymore. Your brain has filed it in the vast archive of things that don't matter now. Similarly, you forget most of your dreams within minutes of waking. Not because dreams are meaningless, but because they're usually not relevant to waking life. Your brain, pragmatic as always, declines to burden your conscious memory with them. This selectivity allows memory to be useful rather than paralyzing. You remember how to drive without remembering every individual time you've driven. You remember your friend's personality without remembering every conversation you've ever had. The brain extracts general patterns and discards most specific instances. These patterns, these generalized memories, are actually more useful than perfect recall would be. They allow you to recognize situations and respond appropriately without having to consciously remember every similar situation you've encountered. They create intuition, that sense of knowing without knowing how you know. Of course, there are things you wish you could remember that have slipped away. The sound of a deceased, loved one's voice, the details of a childhood home, the name of someone who was briefly important to you. These losses can ache, but even these are part of the brain's kindness. If every loss remained forever sharp, grief would never heal. If every past moment remained equally vivid, you'd live in memory rather than in life. The fading, the gentle fog that settles over old memories creates distance. And distance sometimes is necessary for peace. Right now, as you rest, forgetting is happening. Tiny details from today are already beginning to blur. The exact time you woke up, the precise wording of something you read, the color of a car you passed. These things are dissolving like salt in water, and that's okay. That's the brain working properly. It's keeping what you need and releasing what you don't. You can trust this process. You don't need to clutch at every detail, trying to hold onto everything. Your brain knows what to keep. In fact, trying too hard to remember can interfere with natural memory. When you relax, when you let go, memories often surface on their own. They arrive like birds landing in a tree, but only if you're still. If you're frantically chasing them, they scatter. So practice letting go. Practice trusting that what needs to be remembered will be remembered. The rest can dissolve without regret. Forgetting is not failure. It's the brain's way of caring for you, protecting you from overwhelm, allowing you to wake each day unburdened by the total weight of your past. Tomorrow morning, you won't remember most of tonight. You'll know you slept. You might have a vague sense of having heard something soothing, but the specific words will have faded. And that's exactly as it should be. You don't need to remember. You only need to rest. The forgetting is part of the rest. Your life is not a smooth, continuous stream. It's punctuated, divided into chapters by moments that stand out from the flow. These moments are called temporal landmarks. Their reference points in the landscape of memory, flagpoles that help you organize the chaos of experience into something comprehensible. Some temporal landmarks are shared across a culture. The new year, holidays, the changing seasons, the first day of school or work after a break. These are points on a collective calendar that everyone recognizes as significant. They divide time into befores and afters. When someone asks when something happened, you often answer in relation to these landmarks. It was just after New Year's, right before Christmas, early in the fall semester. The landmarks give you coordinates. They help you locate memories in time. The way street addresses help you locate buildings in space. Other landmarks are personal. Your birthday, the anniversary of a relationship, the day you started a job or ended one, the day you moved to a new home. These divide your life into eras. There was before I lived here, and after, before I met them, and after, before this change, and after. These personal landmarks can be incredibly powerful. They reorganize your entire sense of your own history. Sometimes a single day becomes the pivot around which everything else arranges itself. There's the time before the diagnosis and after, before the loss and after, before you learned that thing that changed everything, and after. Even smaller landmarks have organizing power. Researchers have found that people are more likely to pursue goals after temporal landmarks. The fresh start effect, they call it. Monday is a better day to begin a diet than Wednesday, even though there's no objective difference between the days. The first of the month feels more auspicious than the 17th. A birthday motivates change in a way that an ordinary day does not. Why? Because landmarks feel like new beginnings. They create a psychological sense of turning a page, starting a fresh chapter. The past is on one side of the landmark and the future on the other. You feel somehow like a slightly different person after crossing the landmark. The failures and habits of the old chapter don't have to define the new one. This is partly why New Year's resolutions are so common despite being so often abandoned. The landmark of January 1st is powerful. It feels like a genuine fresh start. The fact that time is actually continuous, that January 1st is arbitrary, doesn't matter. The psychological experience of newness is real. You can create your own landmarks intentionally. You don't have to wait for the calendar to provide them. Deciding that today is significant makes it significant. Declaring this Monday the beginning of a new approach makes it so. Small rituals can serve as landmarks too. The first cup of coffee marks the beginning of morning. A walk after dinner marks the transition to evening. Sunday night preparation marks the mental shift into the work week. These tiny landmarks structure time at a small scale, giving shape to days that might otherwise blur together. Without landmarks, time becomes undifferentiated. One day bleeds into the next. Weeks vanish. Months disappear. This is why periods of routine are so hard to remember. They lack landmarks. There's nothing to distinguish Tuesday from Wednesday, this week from last week. The brain, finding nothing distinctive, stores very little. This is also why time seems to accelerate during periods of routine. If every day is the same, you're essentially living the same day repeatedly. And the brain doesn't store redundant information. So when you look back, there's almost nothing there. A month of identical days compresses in memory to almost nothing. And when there's nothing to remember, it feels like no time passed at all. But introduce landmarks, even small ones, and time expands again. Each landmark creates a before and after. Memory has something to hold on to. When you look back, you see a landscape with features rather than a blank plain. Some of the most vivid memories are clustered around landmarks. You remember your wedding day in detail because it was a major landmark. You remember specific birthdays, specific holidays, the day you graduated or moved or started something new. These memories are rich because the landmark made you pay attention. You knew, even as the day unfolded, that it mattered, but you can bring that quality of attention to ordinary days too. You can create micro landmarks by deciding that something ordinary is worth noticing. Today, I will pay attention to the trees. This evening, I will really listen to music. This walk will be the one I remember. The decision itself creates the landmark, and the landmark enhances memory. You're more likely to remember the walk you decided to pay attention to than the 100 walks you took on autopilot. Right now, this moment could be a landmark if you choose. Not a major one, perhaps, but a small flag planted in the landscape of this year. The night you listened to something gentle about time and memory. The night you let yourself rest deeply. The night that was different from other nights because you decided it was. Tomorrow, you might remember this, or you might not, but the possibility is there. You've created a small landmark simply by noticing that you could. Over a lifetime, these landmarks accumulate. They create the structure of your autobiography. The story you tell about your life is largely a story of landmarks. When I was a child, and after I moved away, and before I knew better, and since then, these phrases mark the chapters. Between the landmarks, much is forgotten, but the landmarks remain, standing like stones in a field, marking the places where something shifted, where time bent, where one thing ended and another began. And here's the beautiful part. You get to decide, at least partially, where the landmarks go. Not always. Some are thrust upon you by events beyond your control, but others you can choose. You can decide that this matters, that this is worth remembering, that this is where something new begins. That choice, subtle as it is, gives you some agency over your own timeline. You can't control time itself. It flows at its constant rate regardless of your wishes, but you can create landmarks that give that flow shape and meaning. And in the space between the landmarks, you can rest. You don't need every moment to be significant. Most moments should be soft and unremarkable. Sleep is one of these. A gentle ordinary that happens every night, unmarked and unremembered. And that's exactly as it should be. Memories arrive at different speeds. Some come instantly, effortlessly. Others require patient searching. And the difference tells you something about how memory is organized. When someone asks your name, the answer appears immediately, no searching required. The neural pathway from question to answer is well-traveled, automatic. This is called retrieval. And for frequently accessed information, it happens at remarkable speed, sometimes as fast as 150 milliseconds. That's twice as fast as the blink of an eye. But when someone asks what you had for lunch last Tuesday, you have to think. You might close your eyes. You might try to reconstruct the day. What else happened Tuesday? Where were you? What usually happens on Tuesdays? You're searching, scanning through time, trying to find the memory. This searching takes time. Seconds, maybe longer. You might not find the answer at all. The memory might be too compressed, too faint, lost in the fog of similar lunches and ordinary Tuesdays. Scientists once believed that all memory retrieval took about half a second, based on studies measuring hippocampal activity, but recent research has discovered something surprising. The brain can actually bypass the hippocampus for certain rapid retrievals, using a neural shortcut that delivers an early signal. A quick check that says yes, this memory exists. Think of it like a library with two systems. For frequently requested books, there's a quick reference desk right at the entrance. The librarian there knows exactly where the popular titles are and can point you to them instantly. For obscure volumes, you need to venture deep into the stacks, consulting the catalog, searching shelf by shelf. Both books exist in the library, but accessing them takes vastly different amounts of time. The speed of retrieval depends partly on how often you access a memory. Each time you remember something, you strengthen the pathway to it. The memory becomes easier to find. Retrieval itself acts as a kind of rapid consolidation. Each act of remembering makes future remembering faster and more reliable. This is why rehearsal helps learning. It's not just that repetition moves information into long-term storage. It's also that repetition creates clear, fast paths to that information. The more you retrieve something, the less dependent you become on the hippocampus. The memory gets embedded more firmly in the neocortex, where it can be accessed more quickly. Think of it like trails in a forest. The first time someone walks a route, they leave barely any mark. But if that route is walked daily, it becomes a clear path. The undergrowth is trampled. The way is obvious even after years without use. You can still see where the path was. Some memories are accessed so often they become permanent highways. Your name, your address, the faces of people you love, basic facts about the world. These are so well rehearsed that retrieval is essentially instantaneous. The neural patterns are so strong, so automatic, that conscious effort isn't required. Other memories are rarely accessed. They're like paths walked once or twice decades ago. The forest has grown back over them. They might still exist in some form, but finding them would require serious searching. Maybe you'd never find them at all. This creates an interesting situation. There are things you learned once, stored successfully, but can no longer access. The information is in there somewhere, but the path has been lost. The memory exists, but is functionally unavailable. Sometimes the right cue can reveal these lost memories. A smell, a song, a photograph can suddenly illuminate a path you hadn't walked in years. The memory that seemed gone comes flooding back in remarkable detail. This experience can be startling. You had no idea you still knew this, but apparently, somewhere in the vast neural network, it was preserved. These sudden retrievals feel different from normal remembering. They have a quality of surprise, of gift. You didn't go looking for the memory. It arrived unbidden, triggered by some association you didn't consciously make. The smell of a particular soap brings back your grandmother's bathroom. A song on the radio brings back being 16. These moments can be intensely vivid, sometimes more vivid than memories you access regularly. Emotional arousal at the time of encoding can create particularly strong traces. And when these traces are activated by the right cue, they come back with remarkable clarity. The vividness can feel almost like reliving rather than merely remembering. Interestingly, this vividness doesn't always mean accuracy. Emotional memories are often remembered with high confidence, even when they're not remembered consistently. The feeling of recollection is intensified by emotion, creating a subjective sense of accuracy that may exceed the actual accuracy. This is partly because memories that you haven't accessed in decades may have been protected by lack of access. Memories that you rehearse frequently can actually change over time. Each time you remember something, you're not accessing the original memory. You're accessing the last time you remembered it, and each remembering can introduce small distortions. It's like making a copy of a copy of a copy. Each generation loses a bit of fidelity. The memory you access frequently is well worn, but it may no longer be entirely faithful to the original experience. The memory you haven't accessed in decades, if you can reach it, might be closer to the original. It's been sitting in storage, relatively unchanged, waiting. And when the right cue brings it forward, it can feel remarkably fresh. Right now, as you rest, some memories are becoming faster to access, while others are slowing. The thoughts you had today, the things that mattered, are being rehearsed unconsciously during sleep. Neural patterns are reactivating. Pathways are being strengthened. Tomorrow, some of today will be easier to remember than it is right now. Sleep is creating those faster routes, those clearer paths. Other details, the ones that didn't matter, are already fading. The paths to them are growing over. You don't need to control this process. It happens automatically, guided by the brain's wisdom about what's important and what isn't. Your only task is to rest, to let the consolidation happen, to trust that the memories worth keeping will find their fast roots, while the others gently slip away. Memory feels like truth. When you remember something, it carries the quality of fact. You were there, you saw it, you know what happened. But memory is not a recording. It's a reconstruction, and reconstructions, however faithful they try to be, can drift from the original. False memories are more common than most people realize. Not grand confabulations necessarily, but small distortions. Details that shift, events that blend together. Things you think you remember, but actually learned about later. Scientists have studied how false memories form, and the mechanisms are surprisingly simple. One involves what's called gist memory. Instead of storing exact details, your brain often stores the general idea of what happened, the gist. And when you later try to remember, you reconstruct details based on that gist. Imagine someone reads you a list of words: bed, pillow, night, dream, blanket, snore, rest, tired. Later, they ask if the word sleep was on the list. Many people will confidently say yes. It wasn't. But all the other words were related to sleep, and the brain extracted that gist. When reconstructing the memory, it seems natural, even certain, that sleep must have been there. This happens in everyday life too. You remember the gist of a conversation, but not the exact words. When you tell someone about it later, you reconstruct what must have been said based on the general meaning. The reconstruction feels like memory, and over time, the reconstruction becomes the memory. Another mechanism is source confusion. You remember a piece of information, but forget where you learned it. Maybe you read something in a news article, but later you remember a friend telling it to you. Or maybe you imagined something vividly, and later the imagined scene feels like a real memory. The brain regions involved in imagining and remembering overlap significantly. The occipital and parietal regions that activate when you picture something in your mind are similar to those that activate when you recall something you actually saw. This similarity can cause confusion. The imagined and the real begin to blur. This is particularly relevant for childhood memories. Young children have vivid imaginations. They also hear stories about themselves from parents and relatives. Over time, imagined scenes and stories told by others can become incorporated into autobiographical memory. You might remember something that actually happened to a sibling, or something you only saw in a photograph, or something you were told about so many times it feels like personal memory. These aren't failures exactly. They're features of how memory works. The brain prioritizes meaning over precision. It stores what matters: the emotional truth, the relational truth, the narrative truth. The exact details are less important than the overall pattern, but this flexibility means memory is suggestible. Leading questions can implant details. Repeated exposure to misinformation can change what you remember. The hippocampus, which helps bind memories together, can also bind together things that didn't actually co-occur. False associations form. Research has shown that when people form false memories, there's reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex during retrieval. This region is responsible for monitoring, for checking whether a memory is real or imagined, accurate or distorted. When monitoring fails, false memories slip through unchecked. There's also greater similarity in neural patterns among related items in the temporal lobe. When memories are too similar to each other, they can blend. You remember something happening in one context when it actually happened in another. You remember one person saying something that was actually said by someone else. These errors happen more as we age, partly because the prefrontal cortex, the monitoring system, becomes less efficient. But they happen to everyone at every age. Memory is inherently reconstructive, and reconstruction is inherently imperfect. This doesn't mean you can't trust your memories. Most of the time, memory serves you well. The gist is usually accurate even when details aren't. The broad strokes of your life story are real even if some of the fine details have shifted, but it does mean you should hold your memories lightly. What you remember as absolute truth might be a reconstruction that's drifted slightly from the original. Someone else who was there might remember it differently, not because one of you is lying, but because you each reconstructed the event in your own way. This is especially important to remember during disagreements. When you're certain you remember something one way, and someone else is equally certain they remember it differently, both of you might be sincere. Memory isn't a perfect record that one person has right and the other has wrong. It's two different reconstructions, each influenced by perspective and attention and subsequent experiences. There's a strange phenomenon called the Mandela effect, where large groups of people share the same false memory. People remember a children's book series as Berenstain Bears, when it was actually Berenstain Bears. They remember a movie line as Luke, "I am your father," when the actual line was, "No, I am your father." These collective false memories show how powerfully our brains can fill in what seems right rather than what actually was. The misinformation effect demonstrates this too. If people witness an event and then are exposed to incorrect information about it, many will later remember the incorrect version. The misinformation becomes incorporated into the memory. The original fades or becomes confused with the false information. Yet, despite all of this, the reconstructions, the distortions, the false details, memory still gives you continuity. It still tells you who you are. It still connects your past to your present. The story might not be perfectly accurate in every detail, but it's yours. It shapes you. It guides you. Right now, as you drift toward sleep, your brain is consolidating today's experiences. Some details will be preserved accurately. Others will shift slightly. A few might blend with similar memories or be influenced by your current state of mind. And that's okay. You don't need perfect accuracy. You need a usable past, a coherent story, a sense of continuity. Memory provides that even when it gets the details wrong. So rest. Let the reconstruction happen. Trust that the memories that form tonight will be good enough, true enough, real enough to serve you tomorrow and all the tomorrows after. Perfect accuracy is impossible, but meaning, connection, identity, these survive even the imperfections. Sometimes you walk into a room and stop, frozen by the strangest sensation. You've been here before, not in reality, but somehow in memory. The light slanting through the window, the arrangement of furniture, the feeling in the air, all of it is achingly familiar despite being new. This is déjà vu, from the French for already seen. It's one of the most peculiar experiences consciousness can produce. A moment where time seems to fold in on itself. The sensation typically lasts only seconds. A brief wash of familiarity, often accompanied by eeriness or uncanniness. You know intellectually that this is your first time in this room, or this first time having this conversation, yet some part of your brain insists otherwise. Some part of you remembers this, even though there's nothing to remember. Most people experience déjà vu occasionally. Studies suggest that somewhere between 60 and 80% of people have felt it at least once. It's more common in young adults than in older adults, and it tends to happen more when you're tired or stressed. For a long time, déjà vu was mysterious. A glitch, a hiccup in consciousness with no clear explanation. But neuroscience has begun to understand what's happening in those strange seconds. The leading theory involves a miscommunication between two parts of your brain. The hippocampus, which processes new experiences, and the temporal lobe, which stores memories. When these two regions briefly fail to coordinate properly, you get a strange doubling. Your brain processes the current moment as both new and remembered simultaneously. The recognition system fires inappropriately, tagging a present experience with the feeling of pastness. The result is that momentary perceived scene is given the characteristics of familiarity that normally accompany a conscious recollection. It's not that you're actually remembering anything. there's no real memory being accessed. Instead, the feeling of memory, the subjective sense of familiarity, has been triggered in isolation from any actual remembered content. Think of it like a false alarm. Your brain has systems designed to recognize when something has happened before. Usually, these systems only activate when there's a genuine match between current experience and stored memory, but occasionally, the recognition system fires without a match. You feel the familiarity without there being anything actually familiar. Another theory suggests déjà vu happens when two cognitive processes that usually run in sync briefly become asynchronous. Perhaps the familiarity judgment and the conscious awareness happen at slightly different times. Your brain recognizes something as familiar a split second before you become consciously aware of the experience. That tiny delay creates the sense that you're experiencing something you've already experienced. A third explanation involves divided attention. Perhaps you perceived your surroundings unconsciously before you consciously noticed them. Maybe you glanced into the room before fully entering it, processing the scene without awareness. Then, when you consciously look, the information is already stored. It feels familiar because you did actually see it just moments ago without realizing you were seeing it. All of these theories point to the same underlying truth. Déjà vu arises from the brain's complex timing mechanisms going slightly out of sync. Memory and perception and consciousness usually coordinate seamlessly, but occasionally they hiccup. And in that hiccup, you feel displaced in time. The experience can be unsettling precisely because it challenges your sense of temporal reality. You rely on memory to know what's past and perception to know what's present. When those signals conflict, it creates a brief existential vertigo. Am I remembering or am I experiencing? Is this now or was it then? The answer, of course, is that it's now. It's always now. But for a few seconds, your brain has tagged now with the feeling of then, and the overlap is disorienting. Interestingly, déjà vu is an established symptom of temporal lobe epilepsy. People with this condition may experience déjà vu frequently, sometimes as an aura that precedes a seizure. This clinical connection supports the idea that déjà vu involves activity in the temporal lobe and hippocampus. When these regions are affected by epileptic activity, the sensation of inappropriate familiarity becomes more common. But in most people, déjà vu is harmless, a curiosity, a reminder that consciousness is more fragile and peculiar than we usually notice. Most of the time, your brain operates so smoothly that you don't notice its workings. But déjà vu pulls back the curtain briefly. It reveals the constructed nature of experience. There's a related phenomenon called jamais vu, never seen. This is the opposite experience. Something familiar suddenly feels alien and strange. You look at a common word and it seems wrong, like you've never seen it before. You enter your own home and it feels unfamiliar. The recognition system fails in the opposite direction, denying familiarity to something that should be familiar. Both déjà vu and jamais vu show how much your sense of reality depends on proper coordination between brain systems. Consciousness feels unified and seamless, but it's actually the product of many separate processes running in parallel. Usually they align. Occasionally they don't. And when they don't, you get these strange experiences where time feels wrong, where familiarity and novelty swap places. Right now, as you rest in darkness, your brain is less likely to produce déjà vu. The phenomenon seems to happen more during waking activity, particularly when you're navigating new environments. In sleep, in stillness, the systems relax. There's less chance of miscommunication because there's less happening. But even here, even in this quiet, your sense of time remains active. You know this is night. You know you've been lying here for minutes, or perhaps longer. You have a sense of sequence, of duration, of before and after. This temporal awareness is so fundamental you barely notice it, but it's there, maintained by the constant coordination of memory and perception. You know what has happened and what hasn't. You know what's new and what's familiar. You know where you are in the stream of time, and most nights, this knowledge remains stable and clear. But on some nights, in some moments, the systems slip, and for a few seconds, you might feel like you've dreamed this before. Like this moment is both happening and has happened, like time has doubled back on itself. If that happens, don't worry. It's just your brain being briefly, beautifully strange. A hiccup in the machinery of consciousness. A reminder that even time, even memory, even the bedrock certainty of now, all of these are constructions, fragile and strange and easily disturbed. And then the moment passes. The systems realign. Time flows forward again, ordinary and linear, carrying you gently towards sleep. Memory doesn't just look backward, it also looks forward. The same neural systems that allow you to remember the past allow you to imagine the future. Scientists call this mental time travel. It's the ability to project your consciousness away from the present moment, backward into memory, or forward into imagination. And remarkably, both directions use largely the same brain machinery when you imagine what you'll do tomorrow. You're using your hippocampus, the same structure that helps you remember yesterday, helps you envision tomorrow. You're also activating the ventral medial prefrontal cortex and posterior cingulate cortex, regions involved in self-referential processing. This makes sense when you think about it. To imagine the future, you need raw materials. And those raw materials come from memory. You've never actually experienced tomorrow, so you can't know what it will be like, but you have experienced many previous tomorrows. You've woken up before. You've eaten breakfast before. You've worked before. You draw on those past experiences to construct a plausible future. When you imagine a future event, you're essentially recombining elements from memory into a new configuration. You're using semantic memory, general knowledge about how the world works, to create a backdrop, and you're using episodic memory, specific personal experiences, to fill in details. Imagine you're planning a vacation to a place you've never been. You can still picture it. You imagine walking on a beach, even though it's not a beach you've seen. You draw on memories of other beaches. You import the feeling of sand under your feet, the sound of waves, the taste of salt air. All of these are memories, repurposed and rearranged into an imagined future. This is why people with hippocampal damage struggle, not only with memory, but also with imagination. Without access to episodic memory, they can't construct detailed future scenarios. They can think about the future in abstract terms, but they can't mentally travel there. They can't picture themselves in a specific future moment. The ability to imagine the future is essential to human civilization. Without it, there would be no planning, no building, no culture. You couldn't make decisions that pay off later. You couldn't sacrifice present comfort for future benefit. You couldn't work toward goals or prepare for contingencies. Every building you've ever entered, every road you've ever walked, every system you've ever relied on, all of these exist because someone was able to mentally time travel into the future and imagine what could be. The future doesn't exist yet, but we can visit it in our minds. And having visited it, we can try to make it real. This future-oriented thinking also shapes your sense of identity. You're not just the sum of your past experiences. You're also the collection of your future possibilities. Who you imagine you might become influences who you are today, your goals, your hopes, your plans. These are all forms of mental time travel that organize present behavior. Interestingly, when you imagine future events related to personal goals, certain brain regions become more active. Your brain distinguishes between futures that matter to you and futures that don't. It devotes more resources to imagining the personally relevant ones. This suggests that future thinking isn't just neutral projection. It's motivated, goal-directed. Your brain is using imagination not just to predict what might happen, but to plan what you want to make happen. And here's something beautiful. Mental time travel creates the concept of time itself by being able to compare past, present, and future. By being able to hold all three in mind simultaneously, you develop an understanding of time as a dimension in which you exist. You see the continuity between what was, what is, and what could be. Without this ability, you would be trapped in the eternal present. Animals without mental time travel, live this way. They respond to current conditions, but don't plan extensively or reminisce. They exist in now, without the weight of then or the draw of later. But you live in all three tenses at once. Right now, as you lie here, you're aware of the day that has passed. You have some sense of tomorrow waiting on the other side of sleep. And you're here, in this present moment, suspended between the two. This is the cognitive rudder that allows your brain to navigate the river of time. Without it, you would drift. But with it, you can steer. You can look back to see where you've been. You can look ahead to see where you might go, and you can adjust your present course accordingly. The future you imagine isn't fixed, of course. It's provisional, probabilistic, a best guess based on current conditions and past patterns. Tomorrow might unfold entirely differently than you imagine. But the act of imagining still serves you. It prepares you. It motivates you. It gives direction to action. And sometimes the future you imagine becomes a kind of memory before it's even happened. You picture an upcoming event so many times that when it actually occurs, it feels familiar. You've already experienced it in imagination. The real version is almost anticlimactic compared to the anticipated version. This is why worry can be so consuming. When you imagine negative futures repeatedly, you're essentially living them over and over in mental time travel. Each imagined scenario feels real while you're imagining it. The brain doesn't always distinguish clearly between simulated and actual experience. Both activate similar neural patterns. So worrying about tomorrow is, in a sense, experiencing a bad tomorrow many times, and because those imaginings feel like memories, they have the same emotional weight, the same sense of reality. They accumulate. One potential bad future becomes dozens of experienced bad futures in your mind, but the same mechanism works positively too. When you imagine good futures, when you mentally rehearse success or joy or connection, you're giving yourself something to move toward. You're creating attractive possibilities that pull you forward through time. Right now, you might be aware of tomorrow waiting. Maybe there are things you need to do, places to be, conversations to have. Your brain has probably already sketched the rough outlines of how tomorrow might unfold. But for now, let those imaginings rest. Tomorrow isn't here yet. It doesn't need your attention right now. You're allowed to release the future the same way you've released the past. Mental time travel is a gift, but you don't have to use it constantly. Sometimes the most restful thing you can do is abandon both memory and imagination. Let the past settle. Let the future wait. Just be here in this present moment, traveling nowhere, but staying still in the gentle darkness of now. There's a particular flavor of memory that feels different from ordinary remembering. It's tinged with longing, with warmth, with a gentle sadness for time that has passed. It's called nostalgia. The word comes from Greek roots, nostos, meaning homecoming, and algos, meaning pain. The pain of wanting to return home. But nostalgia isn't quite pain, and it isn't quite pleasure either. It's somewhere between. Bittersweet. When you feel nostalgic, specific brain regions activate. The hippocampus, of course, retrieving the autobiographical memory, but also the amygdala, processing the emotional weight of what you're remembering. And the brain's reward system releases dopamine and oxytocin, neurotransmitters associated with pleasure, bonding, and well-being. This chemical response explains why nostalgia can be comforting, even though you're remembering something you've lost. A time, a place, a person, a version of yourself. The act of remembering feels good. It's warm, safe, meaningful. Psychologists have found that nostalgia serves important functions. It acts almost like an emotional immune system. When you're feeling lonely, disconnected, or uncertain, your brain tends to retrieve nostalgic memories to restore feelings of social connection, self-worth, and stability. The memories nostalgia brings forward aren't random. They're often what researchers call redemption sequences, narratives where something difficult progresses to something positive. You remember struggling through something and emerging okay on the other side. You remember being young and uncertain, but also hopeful and alive. These memories don't just reflect the past. They actively help you cope with the present by reminding you of times when you belonged, when you mattered, when life felt meaningful. Nostalgia counteracts current feelings of disconnection or meaninglessness. Interestingly, you can feel nostalgic for times that were objectively harder than your current life. You might long for college years spent broke and stressed. You might miss a job you were relieved to leave. The nostalgia isn't really about the objective circumstances. It's about the feelings those times evoke, the intensity, the newness, the sense of possibility. This is connected to why childhood memories often carry such strong nostalgia. Not because childhood was perfect. Most childhoods include plenty of difficulty, but because childhood felt expansive, time moved slowly. Everything was new. You were becoming rather than being. And there's something in us that longs for that quality of experience, regardless of the specific details. Nostalgia also tends to smooth away the rough edges of memory. You remember the broad strokes, the emotional essence, but forget some of the frustrations and disappointments. This isn't dishonesty. It's the natural tendency of memory to preserve meaning over accuracy. What you felt matters more than what precisely happened. Sometimes people feel nostalgic for things they never actually experienced. You can feel nostalgic for a decade you didn't live through, for a place you've never been, for a version of life you only know from stories or movies. This might seem strange, but it makes sense given how nostalgia functions. You're not really longing for the thing itself. You're longing for the feeling the idea of it evokes. Simplicity, belonging, meaning, connection. These are universal human needs, and anything that seems to promise them can trigger the nostalgic response. Nostalgia is also deeply social. The memories that carry the strongest nostalgic flavor are usually memories of time spent with others, friends, family, communities you belonged to. Even if you remember being alone physically, you're often remembering a time when you felt more connected to the world, more part of something. This social dimension is why nostalgia often strikes when you're feeling isolated. Your brain is essentially saying, remember when you belonged. Remember when you weren't alone. And in remembering, you feel temporarily less alone. The people from those memories feel present again, even though they're not. Music is a particularly powerful trigger for nostalgia. A song you haven't heard in decades can instantly transport you to the time when you heard it constantly. The memory comes rushing back with extraordinary vividness. Not just the events, but the feelings, the atmosphere, the sense of who you were. This happens partly because music and memory are processed in connected brain regions, but it also happens because music is often tied to specific periods of life. The songs you listened to at 15, the album that played during a particular summer, the music that was popular during an important transition. These become time capsules, preserving not just the sound, but the entire emotional landscape of when you first heard them. Smells work similarly. The olfactory system is closely connected to memory and emotion. A scent can bring back childhood more powerfully than a photograph. You might smell something and suddenly be 5 years old again, in your grandmother's kitchen or your elementary school hallway. The memory is immediate and total. These sensory-triggered nostalgias are precious. They remind you that your past is still with you. Not gone, not lost, but stored in the brain's vast archive, waiting for the right key to unlock it. But nostalgia can also be painful when it tips too far into longing. When you wish so intensely to return to the past that you can't engage with the present. When the sweetness curdles into bitterness, that time only moves forward, never back. The healthiest relationship with nostalgia seems to be one that allows you to visit the past without wanting to live there. To let the memories be comforting without becoming a prison. to acknowledge that those times were real and meaningful, while also accepting that they're over. That new times can be meaningful too, even if they're different. Right now, in this quiet darkness, you might feel a gentle nostalgia for the day that's ending, for moments earlier today, already receding into pastness, or for longer ago, last week, last year, decades back. The mind wanders through time when given space to wander. Let it. Let yourself visit those warm memories. Let yourself feel the bittersweetness of time that's past, but not forgotten. There's comfort in knowing you've lived enough to have things worth missing. There's sweetness in the ache of remembering, and when the nostalgia has run its course, when you've visited the past long enough, you can let it rest. The memories will still be there tomorrow. They're not going anywhere. They're woven into you, part of the fabric of who you are. For now, just rest. Let the gentle sadness and gentle warmth of nostalgia mix with the gentle darkness around you. Let it all settle like snow falling soft on a quiet field. Let time, with all its weight and lightness, hold you as you drift toward sleep. And so we've wandered together through the landscape of time and memory, through the architecture of remembering and the texture of now, through neurons that count seconds and gardens that tend themselves in sleep, through the speed of retrieval and the tricks memory plays, through déjà vu and mental time travel and the sweetness of nostalgia. All of this, all of these mechanisms and processes and phenomena, they happen quietly inside you. Always, your brain counting time, storing moments, reconstructing the past, imagining the future, building the continuity that makes you you. You don't have to think about any of it. The hippocampus knows what to do. The time cells fire in their patient patterns. The consolidation unfolds without effort. Memory and time take care of themselves while you simply rest. If you're still listening, that's perfectly fine. If you drifted away an hour ago, that's perfect too. This night has been exactly what it needed to be. Long enough to let you settle, gentle enough to let you go. As you rest here in the darkness, your body is performing its own quiet rituals of night, your heart rate has slowed to its lowest rhythm of the day, beating soft and steady like a distant drum. Your circadian system has sent its evening signals through the pathways of your brain, releasing melatonin into your bloodstream. This gentle hormone moves through you like a tide, bringing the biology of sleep. In your cells, thousands of processes are shifting to their nighttime patterns. Some activities increase, others decrease. Repair mechanisms activate, growth hormones release. Your immune system does some of its most important work while you sleep. All of this happens without your awareness, without your effort. Your body knows how to care for itself in darkness. The suprachiasmatic nucleus in your hypothalamus, that master clock we mentioned earlier, has registered the absence of light. It has sent its instructions throughout your body. Time to rest, time to restore, time to let the machinery of daytime activity wind down into the gentler machinery of night. These are ancient rhythms, older than memory, older than thought. They've been running in living things for millions of years. The cycling of day and night, activity and rest, waking and sleeping. You're part of that vast biological inheritance. Your body remembers how to do this even when your mind forgets. So trust the process. Trust the circadian rhythms that have been keeping time since before you were born. Trust the slow release of melatonin. Trust the slowing of your heart. Trust the consolidation happening in your hippocampus. All of these systems are working in concert. A symphony of biology playing you gently into sleep. Tomorrow, you might remember fragments of what you heard tonight. The seahorse-shaped structure, the neurons that count time, the way childhood felt slower, the bittersweet ache of nostalgia. Or you might remember only that you listened to something soft about memory. Or you might not remember at all. And any of those outcomes is exactly right. What matters isn't what you remember. What matters is that you rested, that you gave yourself these hours of gentleness, that you let time slow down and become spacious instead of rushed and fractured. Every moment you've spent here tonight becomes part of your history now, part of the vast collection of hours that make up a life. This night, this listening, this gradual letting go, it joins all the other nights, all the other moments of rest, and together they create the foundation that allows you to wake and move through the world. There's no pressure to sleep immediately, no urgency, no deadline. Sleep will come when it comes. Your only task is to remain here, comfortable, allowing. The body knows when it's ready. The brain knows when to finally release consciousness and drift into dreams or into the dreamless dark. Some nights, sleep arrives like a sudden wave. Other nights, it comes slowly, gradually, like fog rolling in across a bay. Both are natural. Both are fine. Wherever you are in that process right now is exactly where you should be, so rest your attention. Let it become soft and unfocused. You don't need to follow these words closely anymore. They're just sounds now. A gentle presence in the darkness with you, a voice that asks nothing, expects nothing, simply keeps you company as you drift. May your sleep be deep and dreamless, or filled with pleasant wanderings, whichever serves you best tonight. May tomorrow arrive gently, without alarm or urgency. May your memories be kind, holding onto what serves you and releasing what doesn't. May you wake with the sense that time has passed softly, that the night has done its work, and may time itself, that river we all travel together, carry you softly through these hours, carry you through the darkness and into morning, carry you through this night and into all the nights and days that follow. Thank you for spending this time with Sleepy Facts with Justin. Thank you for allowing these hours to be what they were. Thank you for resting. There's nothing left to do now, nothing left to think about, just this breath and this moment and the gentle darkness all around you. Just this quiet letting go. Sleep well, dear listener. Rest well.